Nodes in InterCalc 3D are the most basic form of model geometry. They're represented by these little solid dots that you see in the image here, and they're used as points of connection between other modeling elements, like a shell to a beam or a beam to a beam. They're also useful for points of support and for points of load application. Now, it's worth mentioning that we have some very handy tools for modeling things like beams and shells, and that when those tools are used, they automatically create the nodes that are required to define the geometry of those particular elements. So in a lot of cases, there is no need to explicitly model nodes. But just because there is that need occasionally, we do have some tools that are useful for both adding nodes and also for modifying the locations of existing nodes. One of the most useful tools for adding nodes in a model is to add them by snapping to the grid. So here on the View tab, I'll toggle on the display of a grid that I've already created that lies in the plane of these three members. And then I'll come to the Create tab and I'll click the Nodes tool. Now I have this pen cursor that indicates that I'm ready to draw nodes. And when I hover over any of the snap points in the grid, I get that triangle that shows that it's snapped exactly to that location. When I want to place a node, I can just click the cursor and move away, and there I can see that I've placed a node. And I can create as many as I want. Now, nodes all have numbers, so at this point it's useful to take a look at node numbers. So I'm going to come to this tool up here and then toggle on the display of node numbers. And then let's talk about how we can both add new nodes using tables and modify existing nodes using tables. So I'll come to tables and then specifically nodes so that we get the nodes spreadsheet. This lists all the nodes that have been defined in the model, their X, Y, and Z coordinates, and then their status as to whether they're normal, visibility, or if they're hidden. Now first, let's assume that I want to make a new node and I want to use the table to do that. The important thing about the table is it doesn't require me to be constrained to one of the increments of the grid. So for instance, I could come in here and say that I want to add one new node. It'll be node number 12. And I can enter this node at 3.3, 0, and 3.3. And then I'll register that and say OK. There's my new node, number 12, and notice that it specifically doesn't fall on the grid. Now, back to the nodes table, let's pick on node number 7 here, and notice that it's modeled as being at 0, 0, 0, but if I modify that to 1, 0, 1, and say OK, not only does that node change, but all of the connected framing changes as well. So that's two different ways that you can model nodes explicitly. Then there are some methods of implicit node modeling, like for instance, there is a tool that allows you to select one or more members and then split that member into multiple beams. And when we go through that process, we see that we've now created a new node implicitly. There are also some other tools. For instance, on the Create tab, there is a templates drop-down that allows us to create lots of different types of model geometry, and that will obviously create many nodes implicitly. Similar to that is this option to create entities from other entities. For instance, there's even an option here to create nodes from the grid, where it automatically creates one node at each grid location, if that's ever useful. And then finally, it's worth noting that there's an advanced meshing tool here, And this is also another method of creating many, many nodes in a few steps by automating the process of creating a mesh of shells. So hopefully that's a helpful overview of nodes, how to add them, and how they can be modified.